Picture this. Alex Eala steps off a plane in New York, cameras already rolling, Filipino flags waving beyond the terminal, and fans chanting her name before she has even reached Flushing Meadows. That alone would be enough to create a scene, but then the attention suddenly shifts. Another major name in women's tennis enters the picture, Aryna Sabalenka. According to the story surrounding Eala's New York arrival, the established superstar was there to welcome one of the sport's fastest rising young players. And just like that, what should have been a routine arrival became another chapter in the growing phenomenon surrounding Alex Eala. For Eala, New York represents much more than another stop on the calendar. At just 21 years old, the Quezon City native has reached a point where every tournament feels bigger than the one before it. Her results have improved, her confidence has grown, and perhaps most noticeably, the crowds following her have become impossible to ignore. Washington, Toronto, Cincinnati, wherever she has played, Filipino supporters have turned up with flags, signs, chants, and an energy that makes her matches feel like something beyond an ordinary tennis event. That excitement didn't appear overnight. Eala's journey began when she picked up a racket at only 4 years old in the Philippines. Even as a kid, her talent stood out. She developed quickly, competed against older players, and started establishing herself as one of the most promising young athletes in Philippine tennis. Then, at 13, came an opportunity that changed the direction of her career, the Rafa Nadal Academy. Leaving home to train in an elite international environment was a massive commitment for someone so young, but it gave Eala access to the kind of competition and development necessary to chase professional tennis at the highest level. She trained against talented players from around the world, learned to live with expectations, and gradually built the game that would eventually take her onto tennis's biggest stages. By 2026, those years of work were producing major results. Wimbledon became one of the defining moments of her rise. Playing on the famous grass courts of the All England Club, Eala reached the 4th round and delivered the kind of performances that forced the wider tennis audience to pay attention. Her run included a headline-making victory over defending champion Iga Swiatek on center court. That was the kind of win that changes the conversation around a player. Suddenly, the question wasn't whether Eala had enough talent to compete against elite opponents. Fans were beginning to ask something much more interesting. How far could she actually go? Then came Washington. Eala entered the tournament with plenty to prove and produced the biggest singles breakthrough of her career. Instead of being intimidated by established names, she played aggressively, handled the pressure, and kept finding ways through difficult matches. The run eventually ended with Eala holding the trophy and celebrating the biggest singles title of her career. For Filipino tennis, the significance was enormous. For Eala personally, it was confirmation. All those years of training, traveling, sacrificing, and believing she could compete at this level were turning into something tangible. She wasn't simply developing anymore, she was winning. And once a young player experiences that feeling, everything changes. The confidence from Washington followed her north into Canada. At the Canadian Open, Eala continued winning and demonstrated that her breakthrough wasn't simply one magical tournament. The streak eventually came to an end against Belinda Bencic, but the larger story remained intact. Eala had become a legitimate threat. Her ranking continued moving upward, and with every strong performance came another wave of attention. Toronto also showed something else. The crowd around Eala was becoming part of the story. Filipino fans traveled to see her. Philippine flags appeared throughout the stands. People waited for autographs and cheered every point as if it were match point. Cincinnati brought more of the same. The atmosphere surrounding Eala was starting to develop its own identity. Call it Eala mania, the Eala effect, or simply national pride. It was real, and it was spreading. That matters because New York is home to one of the largest Filipino communities in the United States. If Toronto and Cincinnati could produce that kind of atmosphere, imagine what Flushing Meadows could sound like with thousands of Filipino and Filipino-American supporters within reach of the US Open. But before Eala could experience that crowd, she had to arrive in New York. The source story places that arrival at John F. Kennedy International Airport on August 19, 2026. Reporters and cameras were positioned around the terminal as anticipation built. Eala emerged looking relaxed despite the attention surrounding her, with her US Open look also attracting interest. Yet clothing quickly became secondary. The real focus was what her arrival represented. This was no longer the young Filipina prospect quietly entering a tournament, hoping somebody would notice her. This was a player arriving with momentum, expectations, an international fan base, and the belief that she could compete with major names. Then came the unexpected twist. Aryna Sabalenka entered the scene. For tennis fans, the contrast was instantly compelling. Sabalenka represents the established elite, someone accustomed to Grand Slam pressure, enormous crowds, major expectations, and life under the microscope. Eala represents the next wave, a young player trying to turn breakthrough results into sustained success. Mahenyo Neo, the two greeted each other warmly, smiling as cameras captured the interaction. For Eala's supporters, seeing her alongside someone of Sabalenka's stature carried symbolic weight. The stars Eala once watched from a distance are now members of the same professional world she occupies. That doesn't mean Eala has accomplished everything they have, far from it, but she has reached the point where she belongs in the same environment. And there's an important difference between admiring champions and believing you can beat them. Namis amoli damailnist, lovienid kadao. Eala's career increasingly appears to be moving toward the second mindset. She has already experienced what it feels like to face celebrated opponents without backing down. She has played singles under pressure and gained valuable doubles experience alongside accomplished players. One particularly meaningful moment was sharing the court with Venus Williams, an experience Eala described as an incredible highlight of her career. Think about that progression. A girl grows up in the Philippines watching tennis stars on television. She leaves home young, trains at an elite academy, spends years working toward the professional tour, and eventually finds herself competing alongside one of the most famous champions in the history of women's tennis. Those experiences provide something rankings cannot fully measure: belief. When you've shared a court with champions, beaten highly ranked opponents, survived pressure matches, and lifted a significant trophy, the names on the other side of the net start becoming less intimidating. That will matter enormously in New York. The US Open isn't a quiet tournament. It's loud, unpredictable, intense, and unmistakably American. The crowd gets involved. Night sessions can feel like prize fights. Momentum can flip in a handful of points, and Arthur Ashe Stadium has a way of making every important moment feel even bigger. For a rising player, that atmosphere can either overwhelm you or bring out something special. Eala has already shown signs that she might enjoy the noise. Her supporters certainly do. For Filipino fans, her matches have become shared experiences that reach far beyond tennis. Families in the Philippines follow along. Filipino communities in North America organize around her matches. Fans thousands of miles apart wave the same flag and celebrate the same victories. That emotional connection explains why Eala's rise feels different from a normal ranking climb. She represents something. For a country without the tennis tradition of the United States, Spain, France, or Australia, watching a Filipina compete against internationally established champions creates a completely different level of pride. Every breakthrough feels historic because there hasn't been a long line of players before her doing the same thing, and Eala understands that responsibility. But one of the most encouraging parts of her development has been her ability to keep bringing the conversation back to tennis. The attention can be exciting. The crowds can be incredible. Meeting stars like Sabalenka can create memorable photographs. None of those things, however, will win a match at Flushing Meadows. Once the umpire calls time, the story becomes much simpler. Serve, return, move, compete. Win the next point. That's the challenge awaiting Eala. The player arriving in New York now is stronger and more experienced than the teenager who once simply dreamed about reaching these tournaments. She has endured losses. She has experienced breakthrough wins. She has seen her ranking climb and watched expectations climb right alongside it. And expectations can be dangerous. When nobody expects you to win, you can swing freely. Once people start predicting deep runs, every early round match suddenly carries another layer of pressure. Opponents also adjust. They study your patterns. They know your strengths. They arrive determined to be the player who stops the hype. That is the next stage of Eala's development. Breaking through is difficult. Staying there can be even harder. New York will test exactly that. A favorable draw could open opportunities, but there are no easy matches at a Grand Slam. The field is loaded with established champions, experienced veterans, dangerous hardcourt players, and young competitors trying to create their own breakthrough stories. Eala will have to earn everything. And that's what makes this US Open so intriguing. There's hype, but there's also substance behind it. Washington showed she can finish a tournament. Wimbledon showed she can perform on a massive stage. Canada showed she can carry momentum from one event into another. Her doubles experiences showed she can learn while competing alongside established stars. Now the US Open asks whether she can put all those pieces together when the attention is at its highest. Sabalenka's presence in the arrival story only adds another layer. One player already understands what it takes to live near the top of women's tennis. The other is trying to discover whether she can get there. Their paths may eventually cross in competition. Maybe they won't. That's the beauty of a Grand Slam draw. But symbolically, the image works because it captures where Eala stands right now. She isn't watching the biggest names from outside anymore. She's entering the same buildings, playing the same tournaments, walking onto the same courts, and chasing the same trophies. That's an enormous change from the 4-year-old kid holding a racket in Quezon City. And through all of it, the connection with Filipino supporters has only grown stronger. In Washington, they celebrated. In Toronto, they traveled. In Cincinnati, they filled sections with flags. Now comes New York. If Eala gets rolling at Flushing Meadows, the atmosphere around her matches could become one of the tournament's most fascinating stories. New York crowds appreciate emotion, and Filipino supporters know how to bring plenty of it. But the real story won't be decided in the airport. It won't be decided by a viral greeting, and it won't be decided by how many flags appear in the stands. It will be decided on the court. Can Alex Eala manage the expectations? Can she stay aggressive when a match gets tight? Can she recover when momentum turns against her? Can she look across the net at another established champion and truly believe the match belongs to her? Those are the questions that matter now, because Eala is no longer simply chasing the opportunity to play on tennis's biggest stages. She has reached them. The next challenge is proving she can stay there. New York has welcomed Alex Eala. The Filipino community is ready. The cameras are rolling. The biggest players in women's tennis know her name. Now comes the part nobody can script. The first ball goes up. The crowd gets loud. And Alex Eala gets another chance to show the world exactly how far this remarkable journey can go.